Have you ever felt that creeping sense that something isn't right, even in a place that seems perfectly normal? Tonight, we're diving into moments that will make you question every shadow, every reflection, and every sound you thought you could ignore. Some of these stories happened in quiet towns, others deep in the woods, but each one carries a chill that lingers long after the story ends. Before we step into the unknown, make sure you hit subscribe, give this video a like, and share it with anyone who loves a good scare. And I want to hear from you. Comment below and tell me if you've ever felt that unshakable dread. All right, now, let's see what waits in the darkness. I still think about that drive more than I should. Not the destination, not even what I found at the end of it, but the way the road felt like it was quietly narrowing around me as the sun dropped behind the ridge. It was late afternoon on a Friday the 13th, a detail I only clocked when my phone buzzed with the date before losing service entirely. I remember scoffing at it, like I was too grown to let superstition get under my skin, but the woods didn't care what I believed. The back roads were empty in that way only mountain roads ever are, where the silence feels deliberate, almost maintained. Trees pressed in close on both sides, their bare upper branches knitting together overhead, swallowing the remaining light. When my GPS went blank, it didn't reroute or glitch. It just stopped, like it had reached the edge of what it was willing to acknowledge. I'd been to my friend's cabin once before, years back, but memory is a fragile thing when landmarks blur into shadow. I drove slower, rolling the window down despite the cold, listening for anything familiar. The creek, the bend near the old logging road, the spot where the trees opened just enough to see the valley. Instead, all I heard was my engine and, faintly, the woods themselves. Leaves shifting without wind, the distant knock of something solid against wood. At one point, I was sure I heard a whistle, thin and uneven, but when I cut the engine to listen, there was nothing, just that pressure in my ears, like the mountains were holding their breath. I told myself I was tired, that the dark place tricks on you when you're alone, and kept going until the road ended without warning, swallowed by pine needles and undergrowth. The cabin was set back farther than I remembered, almost hidden, like it didn't want to be found. Its outline emerged slowly, a darker shape among darker trees, the porch sagging just enough to suggest age rather than neglect. I parked and sat there longer than necessary, hands still on the wheel, convincing myself this unease was just nerves. When I stepped out, the smell hit me first. Damp wood, old smoke, and something faintly sour beneath it, like clothes left too long in a wet basement. The door was unlocked. That should have been my first real warning. My friend was meticulous about that place, even though hardly anyone came up there anymore. I hesitated, then pushed it open, the hinges complaining softly, as if surprised to be disturbed. Inside, the air felt heavier, stale but not dusty, like it was being used more than it should have been. Moonlight filtered through the small windows, catching on the edges of furniture that hadn't been moved in years. The fireplace sat cold and clean, no ash, no soot, yet the smell of smoke lingered stubbornly, clinging to the walls. I dropped my bag and walked through slowly, my footsteps sounding too loud, too present. That's when I noticed the scratches. At first they looked like deep gouges from old furniture, or maybe damage from when the place was built, but the closer I got, the less sense that made. They weren't random. They clustered around door frames, along the corners where walls met, as if something had been pacing, circling, testing boundaries. The marks were uneven, some shallow, some dug deep enough to splinter the wood beneath the paint. I ran my fingers over them before I could stop myself. The wood was smooth in places, polished by repeated contact, and that sent a cold ripple through me. This wasn't weather, this wasn't rodents. It felt intentional, almost desperate, like whatever made them had been trapped and angry. I laughed quietly, the sound brittle in the stillness, and told myself every old cabin has scars, stories you project onto rot and neglect. Still, I couldn't shake the sense that the space was reacting to me, like the air shifted when I moved, like the walls leaned in to listen. I explored room by room, my phone flashlight carving narrow tunnels through the dark. In the small bedroom, the mattress was bare, the frame pushed slightly away from the wall, and behind it, the scratches were worse, layered over each other in a frenzy of lines. In the kitchen, the cabinets were open, hinges creaking faintly as if they'd been disturbed recently, though nothing looked taken. I kept thinking I saw movement just beyond the edge of my vision, something low and quick slipping from shadow to shadow. But every time I turned, there was nothing there. No footsteps, no breathing, just that same oppressive quiet. At some point I realized the smell wasn't just smoke. There was a hint of sweat in it, old and human, and that was when the idea crept in, uninvited and unwelcome, that someone had been living here. Not camping, not passing through, living. The scratches weren't from something trying to get out. They were from something trying to get in, or maybe trying to stay in when it wasn't supposed to be. I thought about the stories people tell in these mountains, about families that vanish into the woods, about folks who come back changed, feral, forgetting how to speak but remembering how to hide. I'd always file those under folklore, cautionary tales to keep kids close to home. Standing there, surrounded by those marks, they felt uncomfortably practical. The sound came then, so soft I almost missed it. A shuffling, deliberate and close, like bare feet on old floorboards. It wasn't loud enough to pinpoint, just enough to suggest presence. My chest tightened. I called out my friend's name, hating the way my voice trembled, and waited. The sound stopped. For a moment, hope flared. Maybe someone else was here, someone I could explain this to, laugh it off with. Then I heard breathing, slow and uneven, coming from somewhere behind me. I didn't turn around right away. I don't know why. Maybe some part of me understood that seeing would make it real in a way I couldn't undo. When I finally did turn, there was nothing there. No one. Just the open doorway leading back to the living room, shadows stretching long and distorted across the floor. I backed away, heart hammering, every instinct screaming to leave. I didn't gather my things. I didn't lock the door. I just stepped out onto the porch, the cold night air hitting me like a slap, and started for my car. As I reached it, I heard a knock from inside the cabin. Not on the door. From within the walls themselves, a dull, hollow sound, followed by a scraping that raised goosebumps along my arms. I drove away too fast, tires spitting gravel, the cabin disappearing in my rearview mirror like it was sinking back into the trees. But the relief I expected never came. The woods felt closer now, crowding the road, the darkness pressing in until my headlights seemed inadequate. More than once I thought I saw figures standing just beyond the beam. Thin, hunched shapes that vanished when I looked straight at them. I kept driving, telling myself not to slow down, not to stop for anything. Yet the feeling that I was being followed clung to me, heavy and persistent, like a hand between my shoulder blades. Even miles later, when the road widened and my phone flickered back to life, that sense didn't fade. It rode with me, settled in the passenger seat, quiet and patient. Sometimes, late at night, I still smell smoke where there shouldn't be any, or hear that faint shuffling sound just before sleep takes me. I don't know who or what was in that cabin, or if it ever truly left. I only know that some places don't need you to stay long to claim a part of you, and once they do, distance doesn't mean much at all. I grew up near an old barn at the edge of our family farm, a weathered structure that leaned slightly to one side as if even the wind had grown tired of holding it up. My grandfather always warned me about it, especially on Fridays the 13th. He called it the night of the Friday steps, a warning I didn't fully understand until much later. That warning had kept me away for years, though I never really questioned it. I was 16, stubborn, and with a mix of courage and curiosity that only teenagers possess. When my friends dared me to walk past the barn alone this particular Friday evening, I felt an almost magnetic pull toward it, a need to see what lay behind the warnings that had haunted my childhood. The sun was just dipping behind the western hills, painting the sky in bruised shades of orange and violet, and the air carried that peculiar heaviness that comes before darkness fully settles, like the world itself was holding its breath. I stepped onto the gravel path leading to the barn, the stones crunching underfoot louder than I expected. Almost immediately I felt it, the subtle, rhythmic sound of footsteps that seemed to follow me. I paused, my stomach twisting as I turned sharply. Nothing. Just the long shadows of the trees stretching across the ground, swaying gently in the wind. I tried to convince myself it was my imagination, the kind of nervous trick your mind plays when you've been told for years that something is out there. But the sound came again, faint but deliberate, slow and unyielding, each step echoing in a cadence that mimicked mine. I began to walk faster, my boots scuffing the gravel. Yet every time I glanced over my shoulder, the steps would stop. I would face forward, heart hammering, and they would resume, like some unseen stalker pacing me, matching my movements. The forest around me seemed impossibly quiet, the normal creaks and chirps of the evening replaced by an oppressive stillness that pressed down on my shoulders. I tried to call out, laugh it off, even muttered curses under my breath, but the sound felt trapped in my throat, swallowed by the heavy air. When I finally reached the barn, it was darker than I remembered. Its wood was blackened by age, the edges warped and splintered, windows broken and dark as holes in the night. The door hung crooked on its hinges, groaning faintly with the wind. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the rough wood, the steps behind me continuing without pause. Though I could no longer tell if they were real or the echo of my panic. With a deep breath, I pushed the door open. The smell hit me first, dust, old hay, and a sharp, almost metallic scent of decay. My eyes struggled to adjust to the gloom, picking out shapes, tools hanging from the walls, crates stacked in the corners, a wheelbarrow overturned in the far end. And then I saw it. Not at first, not clearly, but a shadow crouched in the corner, just beyond the reach of the failing light. I froze, my mind scrambling to rationalize what I was seeing. A trick of the eye, maybe, a pile of rags or a stack of boxes. But the figure shifted. It moved just slightly, enough to make my stomach turn cold. I felt my throat tighten, my legs refusing to obey my desperate urge to run. And then it was gone, as if it had melted into the darkness itself. I turned, heart pounding, and stumbled backward, catching myself on a post. The footsteps returned, closer this time, faster, but still impossibly measured, not chaotic like someone chasing, but deliberate, patient. My mind screamed at me to move, to run, but my body felt rooted, stuck in a terror that was more than fear. It was a deep, gnawing unease that burrowed into my bones. I tried to tell myself it wasn't real, that my grandfather's warnings had planted this image in my mind. But the sound, the pressure, the almost sentient quality of the air around me told me otherwise. I bolted, tripping over gravel and mud, my hands and knees scraping as I scrambled away from the barn. Behind me, the footsteps continued, insistent, echoing even as my own legs carried me faster than I thought possible. They didn't match my pace exactly, but there was no denying they were following, responding to my panic, to the rhythm of my fear. I didn't stop until I was past the tree line, my lungs burning, my chest heaving, the night swallowing the sounds of pursuit. Even then, I couldn't shake it. I would feel them behind me hours later in the quiet of my bedroom, a phantom pressure in the air, faint scratches at the edges of my hearing. The barn itself seemed to pulse in my memory, a living thing that had mocked me the moment I dared its threshold. That night I realized the warnings were not just stories, not just superstition. They were a guide to survival, to understanding that some things exist at the edges of our perception, unseen yet undeniably present. I never spoke to anyone about what I saw, not really. My friends laughed it off, called me dramatic, but I knew the truth. There is a weight to that place, a presence that doesn't belong to any person or animal I've known. And sometimes, late at night, when the wind blows through the trees just right, I swear I hear it again. Footsteps on gravel, slow and deliberate, and a shadow waiting just beyond the corner of my vision. My grandfather is gone now, and the barn is still there, leaning and broken, as though it's been waiting all along for someone foolish enough to walk past it. Even now, years later, I avoid that path when I can. But sometimes, especially on a Friday the 13th, I drive past it slowly, eyes fixed on the barn door, and I can feel that presence, watching, patient, knowing. The air feels heavier, almost breathing around me, and I know that if I were foolish enough to stop, to step onto that gravel again, I would hear the steps, close and deliberate, keeping pace behind me, and I might never be able to convince myself that it's only in my head. The memory of that night is like a scar, a subtle, permanent ache that waits beneath the skin of my daily life, reminding me that some warnings are real and some doors, once opened, never truly close. By the time I reach the old road that leads back to the farmhouse, my pulse finally slows, though the echo of those footsteps lingers in my ears. The barn disappears behind the bend in the road, swallowed by shadows and distance, but I can still feel the weight of it pressing into my back, like a hand I can't shake. I know that place is alive in its own way, and for a long time afterward, I couldn't sleep without checking the dark corners of my room, convinced I'd see a crouching figure, waiting, patient, just beyond the reach of light. The experience left a taste I can't wash away, a lingering dread, a quiet sorrow, and a deep, undeniable truth. Some places in this world are not meant to be walked alone, and some steps, once heard, never stop following you. It started raining hard just past dusk, the kind of rain that turns the narrow country roads into streaming rivers, water rushing over the edges, slick and unrelenting. I was driving back from a job interview, the kind that leaves your hands sore from the pen and your chest tight from nervous energy, and the windshield wipers were doing their best to keep up with the deluge. The headlights barely cut through the gray curtain of sheets that slammed against the car, and the world outside was a blur of wet tree trunks and dripping branches. That's when I saw her. A figure on the roadside, standing there like a painting in a frame of rain, thumb out in the faint hope of a ride. Her coat was soaked through, darkened by water, and her hair plastered to her face, strands sliding down like small rivulets. Something about her stopped me. Not in fear at first, but a deep, instinctual caution that prickled at the base of my skull. I'd grown up on these roads, seen all the usual drunks, wanderers, and lost hunters, but there was a weight to her presence that made the hair on my arm stiffen. Still, my gut told me to pull over. The car slid a little on the slick asphalt as I eased it to a stop. She climbed in silently, shivering, pressing her wet palms against her knees as though trying to hold herself together against the cold that seeped into the cabin. I offered her the heater, and she nodded faintly, not a word escaping her lips. The smell of damp earth and wet wool clung to her coat, and I realized how unnaturally quiet she was. I tried small talk, asking if she had broken down, if she lived nearby, but she didn't answer. All she did was point ahead, a single, deliberate motion with her hand, Fingers straight, palm down, and then she leaned back into the seat, staring out the window with eyes that seemed calm, almost expectant, and utterly devoid of recognition for me. I felt that old, nervous tension in my chest, the kind that makes your stomach churn and your heart pick up its pace, but I ignored it. You always hope that just by keeping your mind busy, the world will make sense again. The road curved sharply ahead, a bend that had swallowed many an inattentive driver over the years. I glanced over at her, ready to comment on the turn, to break the silence that had settled like a thick fog over the car. But my stomach dropped. She wasn't there. Nothing but the back of the seat. The coat, her wet coat, was folded neatly, almost deliberately, like someone had placed it there themselves. And I could feel the icy panic setting in. My hands gripped the wheel tighter, knuckles white, and my foot hesitated over the gas. I flicked the wipers faster, scanning the rain-slick blackness beyond the headlights, and my breath came shallow, uneven. There was no sound of movement, no soft splash of boots in the water, nothing to indicate she had gone anywhere. The only sound was the relentless rain hammering the roof, the tires slicing through the shallow rivers of the road, and my own heartbeat echoing in my ears. I slowed, eyes darting from side to side, the road bending and dipping through the dark hollows of the countryside, flanked by trees that seemed to lean closer the further I drove. I remember thinking, not for the first time, about all those old legends my father used to tell me. The stories about people who vanish along these back roads, the ones that end in rivers, the ones who never made it back home. You hear them as a kid and think they're just ghost stories, ways to keep you from wandering into the woods after dark. But this wasn't a story. My headlights glinted off the slick asphalt, cutting through the rain in stark, short beams, but nothing moved in the water's reflection, nothing beyond the occasional flash of a passing branch. My rational mind tried to piece it together. She had to have slipped into the woods, maybe hidden under the overhang of a tree. Maybe she ran off for some reason. But every instinct in me screamed that what I'd seen, what I had felt, wasn't natural, wasn't explainable. I kept driving, slowing at every shadow, scanning every ditch, every bend, every black mouth of a culvert. The rain showed no mercy, bouncing off the hood, streaming down the windshield in thick lines, and the wipers could barely keep pace. I wanted to convince myself that I was imagining things, that my brain was playing tricks in the isolation of the road. But then I remembered the eyes, calm, almost resigned, but piercing, as if she had known all along that she would disappear. It wasn't the kind of look you get from a tired stranger. It was deliberate, intentional. She had been waiting, expecting, and now she wasn't there. There's a moment you hit when the rational mind and the primal fear collide. The one where you realize that whatever rules you thought governed the world aren't holding anymore. I had it then, a cold sweat creeping down my back, my hands shaking against the steering wheel as I tried to focus. I turned onto a side road, a desperate attempt to retrace my path, to find some sign of her, anything to prove she had been real. The rain didn't relent, and the darkness felt thicker now, like the night itself had waked. The woods pressed in closer, and the smell of wet leaves and damp soil was overpowering, choking in its intensity. And yet, every driveway, every clearing, every stretch of empty asphalt held nothing. The coat was gone too. No trace, not even a smear in the mud where she might have stepped. I reached the edge of a familiar hollow, one I had driven through 100 times, and for a brief moment, the headlights caught something, a figure just beyond the tree line. My heart leapt. I slammed the brakes, rain slapping my windshield, and peered into the shadow. But it wasn't her. It was just a branch twisting in the wind, or maybe my eyes playing tricks. My pulse hammered so loudly that I felt it in my throat, in my temples, in the tightness that gripped my chest. I sat there for a moment, engine idling, trying to gather myself, feeling the rain patter against the roof like 1,000 tiny taps of warning. I finally forced myself to keep moving, taking the long way back to the highway, avoiding the smaller roads where the rain pooled in deep, dark puddles. Even with the lights cutting through the storm, the road felt narrower, almost confining, like the trees were leaning in, waiting. Every bend made me flinch. Every shadow seemed alive. Every sound, a branch snapping, a splash in the roadside ditch, set my nerves alight. And in the back of my mind, that vision of her, so calm, so collected, so impossibly still, refused to let go. I can close my eyes now and see her, the way her coat dripped onto the floor of the car, how her wet hair clung to her face like she had just emerged from a creek, the way she pointed with that quiet insistence. I never saw her again. I drove that stretch of road a dozen times after that, hoping, maybe foolishly, to see her again, to prove to myself that it had been a mistake, a trick of rain and shadows. But the road stayed empty, slick and dark, the woods watching in their patient silence. Sometimes, when it rains this hard, when the sheets of water beat against the windshield and the headlights barely reach beyond the hood, I feel that same chill in my chest, and I think I catch the flash of her eyes in the reflection of the rearview mirror. It's fleeting, gone in an instant, and yet it's enough to make my heart jump, enough to make my hands grip the wheel a little tighter, enough to remind me that some things on these roads don't belong to the world we think we know. I can't explain it. There's no logic to it. No reason for a woman to vanish into thin air, no natural explanation for the coat left behind, folded neatly as though she had merely stepped out for a moment and would return. And yet, the memory is etched into me, sharper than any scar, deeper than any ache. I tell people it was just the rain, my imagination, a trick of the headlights. But even now, every Friday the 13th, when the clouds gather and the storm hits hard, I feel that same tension crawling up my spine. I know that somewhere on those lonely, twisting roads, she's waiting, watching, expecting. And I can't shake the certainty that if I were to stop again, she would get in, quiet and shivering, pointing ahead, and the world would tilt once more into something I can never fully understand. Even driving today, decades later, I still take a different route when the rain starts, when the night is heavy and the asphalt slicks over with water. I keep my eyes forward, my grip tight on the wheel, praying that my imagination isn't failing me. But deep down, I know that it isn't imagination. That night, that bend, that rain, it was real. She was real. And somewhere in the folds of the forest, under the relentless fall of water, the road waits, patient, and she waits with it. Even now, I can't escape it. The memory of calm, expectant eyes in the dark, a presence that was impossibly quiet, yet impossible to ignore. It doesn't fade. It lingers, like the echo of rain on asphalt, like the whisper of wind through pines. It's the kind of memory that sits behind your eyes when you lie awake, the one that makes your pulse race at the sight of a wet coat draped over a chair, the one that makes you wonder if some parts of the world were never meant to be understood. I'll never stop thinking about that night, and I don't think I want to, really. Because there's something about the memory that reminds me I'm alive, that reminds me the woods are full of things you can't explain, that reminds me that some people, or some presences, don't leave when you expect them to. They wait, and sometimes, if you're unlucky enough to cross their path, they leave a part of themselves behind, so subtle, so quiet, that you only notice it when the rain is heavy, when the night is dark, when the road is slick and lonely. Then, and only then, you remember her eyes, calm and expectant, and you understand that some encounters don't end. They just follow you, patient, through every twist and turn, every Friday the 13th, every storm that beats down on a quiet country road. I drove up into the mountains late Friday afternoon. The road narrowing until my tires hummed over cracked asphalt and loose gravel. The farmhouse sat at the end of a long dirt drive, tucked against a slope of hardwoods that leaned in close like they were listening. The owner had warned me it was old and that it had quirks, the kind of thing people say when they don't want to explain too much. I wanted quiet. I wanted isolation. The cell signal died about a mile back, and when I cut the engine, the sudden silence felt thick, like a blanket pulled over my head. The house itself looked sturdy but tired, gray boards bleached almost white, windows dark and reflective. It didn't look abandoned, just forgotten. I remember thinking that forgotten things don't always stay that way. Inside, the air smelled like dust and cold wood, with a faint sour note underneath, like damp fabric left too long in a basement. The floors creaked with every step, not the friendly kind of creak, but sharp pops that sounded like someone shifting their weight behind me. I unpacked slowly, listening to the house settle, telling myself that old places make noise. That's what they do. Still, there was a sense of being watched that clung to me, not from any one direction, but from the walls themselves. The hallway upstairs was narrow and dim, and at the far end was a small door set low into the wall, maybe 3 feet off the floor. It was an attic access, the kind you'd expect in a place like this, except the lock on it was newer than everything else. Clean metal, no rust. It stood out in a way that made my skin prickle. I tried the knob without thinking. It didn't budge. Locked tight. I stood there longer than I meant to, staring at it, feeling something coil in my chest. There was no reason for the door to bother me. It was just a door. But the hallway felt colder the closer I stood to it, and the air smelled stronger there, like old clothes and something faintly animal. I went back downstairs and made dinner, turned on the TV for noise, and kept glancing at the staircase. Every now and then I thought I heard something above me. Not footsteps exactly, but a soft, shifting sound, like someone crawling carefully across a floor they didn't want to creak. That night, sleep came in pieces. I'd drift off and snap awake, heart racing, convinced I'd heard my name whispered right beside the bed. The house had a way of amplifying small sounds. The wind through the trees became breath. The branches scraping the siding became fingernails. Sometime after midnight, I heard a low murmur, so quiet I thought it was part of a dream. It sounded like voices overlapping, too many to count, none of them clear enough to understand. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening hard until it faded back into silence. In the morning, I told myself it was the house settling, the echoes of wind in the attic. I made coffee and watched the fog lift from the trees, trying to shake the unease that had settled into my bones. Friday the 13th felt like a joke at first. I'm not superstitious. I even laughed about it when I realized the date, like acknowledging it would take its power away. I spent the day hiking the property, following old stone walls through the woods, finding rusted farm equipment half swallowed by moss. There were signs the land had been used hard once and then left alone. What bothered me were the paths that weren't quite paths, narrow trails pressed into the leaves that didn't match any animal track I recognized. They looped around the house and disappeared into thickets where the brush grew too dense for deer. I told myself it was old foot traffic from when the farm was active. Still, I kept looking over my shoulder. By evening, the attic door was all I could think about. It nagged at me, a physical pressure behind my eyes. I remembered the lock, how new it looked, and wondered what someone would want to keep sealed up there. When I checked the listing again, there was no mention of attic access at all. I ate dinner standing up, pacing, and finally went upstairs with a flashlight. The hallway seemed longer than before, the shadows deeper. I stood in front of the door and listened. At first, there was nothing. Then, faintly, that same murmur rose up, like a crowd heard through a wall. My breath caught. I pressed my ear to the wood and felt a vibration, subtle but real, like sound carried through bone. I don't know why I went looking for the key. Curiosity feels like a weak word now. It was more like something had reached inside me and pulled. I found it in the back of an old dresser drawer, taped to the underside like someone wanted it hidden but accessible. My hands shook as I slid it into the lock. For a moment, I thought it wouldn't turn. Then it did, with a soft, final click that echoed down the hall. The murmuring stopped all at once, replaced by a silence so complete my ears rang. I opened the door slowly, the beam of my flashlight cutting into the dark. The attic was cramped, the ceiling sloping low, insulation hanging in torn, gray clumps. The smell hit me immediately, stronger than before. Dust, mold, and something else. Something like sweat that hadn't dried in years. As my eyes adjusted, I realized the murmuring hadn't stopped. It had just changed. It wasn't sound in the air so much as sound in my head, whispers brushing the edge of my hearing, too close, like someone leaning in to speak without letting their breath touch you. I took one step inside and felt the floor shift under my weight. That's when I saw them, not clearly, not like bodies. It was more like impressions, places where the dust was disturbed in the vague shape of crouched figures, shadows that moved against the light even when nothing else did. I swung the flashlight around, my heart hammering, and for a second I thought I saw a face pressed into the insulation, features flattened, eyes too deep. When I tried to focus, it dissolved, leaving only a smudge and the sense that I'd been wrong to look. The whispers grew louder, overlapping, urgent, like arguments held just out of reach. Panic took over. I stumbled backward, nearly falling through the doorway, and slammed the door shut with both hands. The lock clicked back into place as if on its own. I stood there gasping, my whole body shaking, the flashlight clattering to the floor. I told myself I'd imagined it. Stress, lack of sleep, the power of suggestion. But as I backed away down the hall, the whispering followed me. It seeped under the door, through the walls, a constant low chorus that shifted with every step I took. Downstairs, it was worse. The sound filled the rooms, rising and falling, sometimes resolving into almost words before slipping away again. I covered my eyes, but it didn't help. It wasn't just sound. It was presence. I felt crowded, hemmed in, like the house was suddenly too small to hold everything inside it. I grabbed my keys and jacket, intent on leaving, but when I opened the front door, the night air brought no relief. The whispers were there too, drifting from the tree line, from the ground beneath my feet. I froze on the porch, staring out at the dark shapes of the woods. For a moment, I thought I saw a movement between the trunks, low and quick. Figures keeping to the shadows, watching. My rational mind scrambled for explanations. Maybe squatters had been using the attic. Maybe they were still there, moving through the walls, listening to me the way I'd listen to them. The idea was somehow worse than anything supernatural. People could do things you couldn't reason with. People could decide you belonged to a place without asking. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the couch with all the lights on, the whispers ebbing and flowing like a tide. Every so often, something thumped above me, not heavy enough to be a person walking, but too deliberate to be the house settling. Near dawn, I heard scratching at the walls, slow and patient. When the sun finally came up, the sound faded, leaving a hollow quiet that felt just as threatening. I packed as quickly as I could, my hands numb, my thoughts scattered. Before I left, I stood in the hallway one last time, staring at the attic door. It was locked again, the key gone from my pocket. I didn't go looking for it. I drove away as fast as the road would let me, not stopping until I had cell service and the noise of other people around me. Even now, back home, Sometimes I hear it when the house is quiet, a low murmur just under the sound of my own breathing. I don't know what was in that attic, or if it's still there, but I know the farmhouse wasn't empty when I arrived. It was waiting. It was close to midnight when the first call came in, and I remember it because the mountains outside my apartment were dead quiet in that way they get after the wind settles. I lived on the edge of a small Appalachian town then, in a converted mill building that overlooked nothing but tree-covered ridges and a strip of road nobody used after dark. My windows were cracked open, letting in the smell of wet leaves and cold pine. When my phone rang, the sound cut through the stillness so sharply I flinched, like it had been waiting for the quiet to be complete before announcing itself. The caller ID was blank. No number, no name, just an empty bar where something should have been. I stared at it longer than I should have. Around here, blank numbers usually meant spotty service or an old landline bouncing through a dozen towers. I told myself that as I answered. The moment I put the phone to my ear, I heard breathing. Slow, wet, deliberate breathing. Like someone had their mouth right up against the receiver. I said hello, once, then again louder. The breathing didn't change. After a few seconds, a whisper slid through it, distorted and thin, like it was coming through a tunnel. I couldn't make out the words, only the shape of them, syllables stretching and collapsing in a way that made my stomach tighten. I hung up and stood there in my kitchen with the phone still in my hand, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the far-off chirp of insects outside. I convinced myself it was a wrong number, maybe someone drunk or messing around. That's what people tell themselves when they don't want to admit they're scared. I set the phone down and tried to go back to what I was doing, but the air felt different after that. Heavier, like the walls had leaned in a little. The next call came while I was eating, fork halfway to my mouth. Same blank ID, same breathing. This time the whisper was louder, closer. I caught the tail end of a word, or maybe a name. It sounded like it was being dragged out from the bottom of someone's lungs. I hung up again, my appetite gone. When it rang a third time while I was in the shower, the sound echoing through the bathroom even though the phone was on the counter outside, something inside me finally cracked. I shut off the water and answered with my hands still shaking. "Who is this?" I asked. My voice sounded small, swallowed by the tile and steam. The breathing stopped for just a second. And in that pause, I could hear something else. Faint but unmistakable, like wind moving through leaves or someone shifting their weight on dirt. Then the whisper came again, clearer this time, and I realized with a jolt that it was trying to say my name. Not quite getting it right, but close enough that my skin prickled. After that, the calls followed me everywhere. Morning, afternoon, night. Sometimes minutes apart, sometimes hours, but always when I was alone. Always when the mountains outside were quiet. I stopped answering, letting it ring until it went dead, but even then I could swear I heard the breathing on the other side of the silence. Once, I found myself listening for it even when the phone wasn't ringing, like my ears were searching for a sound they'd learned to expect. By the time Friday the 13th rolled around, I was exhausted. I hadn't slept more than a few hours at a stretch all week. I'd started jumping at every creak in the building, every car passing on the road below. That morning, I drove up into the forest to clear my head, following an old gravel road that wound past abandoned cabins and rusted-out trucks, half swallowed by brush. Growing up here, you hear stories about people who never quite left the woods, about families that went feral when the mines shut down and the towns dried up. I'd always treated those stories like campfire talk. That day, parked among the trees with my engine off, I wasn't so sure anymore. The phone rang while I was sitting there, windows down, forest air pouring in. Blank ID. I answered without thinking. This time, there was no breathing at first. Just a low, distant sound, like someone calling out across a hollow. Then the voice came through, no longer whispering, stretching my name until it didn't sound like it belonged to me anymore. I dropped the phone onto the passenger seat and drove home too fast, gravel spraying behind me. That night, the calls escalated. They came one after another, relentless, the voice on the other end growing louder, angrier, as if whatever it was had realized I was listening. Sometimes there were multiple voices, overlapping, all straining to say my name. I could hear what sounded like fingers tapping against the phone, nails scraping plastic. At one point, I heard something that made my blood run cold. The faint creak of a door hinge, followed by footsteps on wood, slow and careful. My apartment was silent. I stood in the middle of the living room, phone pressed to my ear. Every light on, heart hammering as the voices screamed for me to answer back. I unplugged the phone and threw it into a drawer, but the ringing didn't stop. It echoed in my head, in the walls, in the hollow space behind my eyes. I started to wonder if it had ever really been coming from the device at all. Around 3 in the morning, I heard something outside, a soft shuffling sound on the gravel below my window. I didn't look. I sat on my couch, knees pulled to my chest, listening as the sound moved away, then stopped. By dawn, I was numb. I took the phone out of the drawer and smashed it against the counter until the screen shattered and the casing split open. The ringing cut off abruptly, leaving a silence so complete it rang in its own way. I sank to the floor and stayed there until the sun came up over the ridges, light spilling into the room like nothing had happened. I moved out of that apartment a week later, left the town not long after. But sometimes, late at night, when the world gets quiet enough, I swear I can hear breathing just beneath the surface of the silence. And every Friday the 13th, no matter where I am, I wake up with my name echoing in my head, stretched thin and wrong, as if something out there is still trying to remember how to say it. I remember the first time I stumbled across that clearing like it was yesterday, though it was years ago. I'd been hiking through the hills late in the afternoon, the kind of day when the air is thick and the sunlight filters through the trees in golden, shaky streams. The forest had been quiet, too quiet, and that's when I saw it. A small, roughly dug grave tucked into a hollow where the trees thinned. No marker, no flowers, nothing to indicate who or what might lie beneath. The soil was darker than the earth around it, almost black, and the air hung heavy, as if it were holding its breath. I can't explain why I felt drawn to it, but something about that empty mound pressed against my chest, a subtle but undeniable pull, like it knew me, like it was waiting. That was Friday the 13th, though at the time I didn't pay much attention to the date. I didn't know it would become a ritual I couldn't break, a place that would haunt me in ways I could never leave behind. The first time I went back after that initial discovery, I stayed until the light faded completely, my headlamp cutting little swaths of visibility through the thinning dusk. That's when I first heard it, the soft scratching beneath the soil, faint at first, almost as if the earth itself were restless. My rational mind told me it was just roots shifting, maybe a rabbit digging, but the sound, it wasn't right. It had a rhythm, deliberate, like something was trying to dig its way out. I froze, holding my breath, and the scratching stopped the instant I did, leaving the clearing dead silent again. My heart hammered so hard, I thought it would echo in the trees. But I couldn't move, couldn't look away from that mound, and I realized with a kind of horror that I couldn't leave. Something inside me made me promise to return, though I didn't know why. The next year, I went back with a friend, hoping the rational explanation would surface. But as we approached the clearing, I noticed how unnaturally still the air had become. Not a breeze stirred the leaves, Not a bird called. The silence was heavy, almost suffocating. That's when I first heard the whispers. Soft, drawn out, and impossible to locate. They called my name, my full name, exactly how it was spoken when I was a child. I turned in every direction, scanning the tree line, my friend doing the same, but no one was there. "It's the wind," my friend joked nervously. But I knew. I'd been hearing that wind my whole life, and now it carried words, names, memories. Over the years, the clearing became something I couldn't avoid. I tried. I moved towns, I changed jobs, even started dating someone new. But there were always signs, reminders I couldn't ignore. Once, I found a photograph I'd lost as a child, pressed under my pillow. Another time, a necklace I thought had vanished entirely turned up tangled in the roots of a tree near the clearing. Each item seemed innocent on its own, but together they painted a picture that I couldn't shake. The grave was aware. Whatever rested there, it was watching, tracking me. I stopped taking friends with me after that. I could see their faces change when they visited, the way their eyes widened as the clearing seemed to breathe around them. The shadows felt longer there, moving at angles that didn't match the trees, and the whispers returned. Always calling, always patient. One night, I stayed until almost midnight, crouched by the grave as the fog rolled in like a tide. I thought I saw something move beneath the surface, a slight, twisting ripple through the black soil. But each time I reached out, it would vanish, leaving nothing but emptiness and that oppressive silence. I swear I could feel its attention on me, waiting, and I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't obey. It wasn't just the sounds either. Sometimes I'd wake up at home, with dirt under my nails or the faint smell of damp soil clinging to my clothes, even though I hadn't been near the clearing. One morning, I opened my mailbox to find a small splintered box with a scrap of cloth inside. A cloth I recognized as something my grandmother had used when I was a child. That was when I realized it didn't just want to watch me. It wanted reminders, evidence that it knew me, that it could reach out and leave traces of itself in my life. Every time I ignored it, I felt it press harder against the edges of my consciousness, nudging me back toward the hills. Last year, I went alone again. The moon was barely a sliver, and the forest seemed alive with its own quiet intelligence. I walked the narrow trail with the weight of every memory I had tethered to that place pressing down on my shoulders. The whispers began almost immediately, threading through the trees, shifting with the wind, echoing across the clearing. This time I could make out words beyond my name, memories of my childhood, conversations I had thought long forgotten. I stumbled forward, gripping my flashlight, and realized with a sickening clarity that the grave wasn't just tracking me, it was gathering me, pulling fragments of my life into itself, stitching together a mosaic I couldn't control. I sank to my knees that night, terrified and mesmerized, as the soil shifted again. A hand, my imagination, seemed to rise beneath the blackened earth. Or maybe it was just a root, twisting and knotted in a grotesque dance. I couldn't tell anymore. The clearing was alive, breathing, speaking, and I was powerless to resist. I thought about running, but every instinct that had ever told me to flee was muted, swallowed by the need to understand, to see what it wanted. And so I sat there, letting the whispers wash over me, until I felt a strange calm settle over my mind, a terrible, unnatural surrender. When I finally stood, the night had thickened into an almost tangible darkness. The clearing seemed smaller somehow, the trees leaning closer, and I felt eyes upon me, even though there was no one there. I left without looking back, though the pool never left. It's in my dreams now, that hollow mound in the hills, black and patient, whispering my name across empty landscapes, waiting for the next Friday the 13th, when I'll feel compelled to return once again. I've tried to forget it, to bury the memory along with whatever lies beneath that soil. But the clearing finds me. It leaves reminders in my house, on my street, even in my pockets. It's patient. It's patient in ways a human mind cannot comprehend. I don't know what's in that grave. I don't know who it once was or what it wants from me. All I know is that it watches and it remembers. And every year, when the trees start to thin and the hills fall silent, I feel it again, tugging me toward that clearing, reminding me that I am never truly free. Sometimes I wonder if the first scratching I heard was a warning, or maybe an invitation I never refused. And I can't shake the certainty that one day, if I keep returning, it won't just be whispers anymore. Even now, typing this, I feel its presence pressing from the edges of my mind. The air seems heavier, like the shadows in the room lean a little too close. I think about the first time I saw the black soil, how unnervingly still the clearing was, how the air seemed to hold its breath. I think about the whispers calling my name over and over again, the way the grave always seemed to be a step ahead of me. And I know I will return. I don't want to, and yet every instinct, every fragment of memory tethered to that place pulls me back. It's patient, unyielding, and it waits for me year after year until I'm nothing but another echo in its quiet, restless soil. There's a lesson in all this, I suppose. Some places are not meant to be found, and some things, once they've taken notice of you, never let go. The forest doesn't forgive, and the hills remember. I've walked away countless times, thinking I could outpace it, but every year, without fail, I feel it tracing the outlines of my life, leaving breadcrumbs, tiny proof that it sees me, knows me, waits. And when I finally give in, as I always do, I know the clearing will be unchanged, black soil, dark and patient, whispering my name across the empty hills, ready for me to kneel once more in that still, unnerving air. Even now, I think about going back, and I shiver. Because the truth is, the grave is not just a grave, it's a presence. It's a patient intelligence buried in black soil, collecting fragments of me each year, and I am powerless to resist it. It waits for Friday the 13th, for the thinning trees, for the quiet forest, for me. And when the next one comes, I know I will return. I always do. It's there, in the hills, always waiting, always remembering, and I'm never free. I remember the night so clearly that it still feels like it's happening again whenever I close my eyes. I had been sent on a last-minute assignment to cover some environmental survey in a remote part of West Virginia, the kind of place where the trees grow so close you can barely see the sky, and the roads are little more than dirt tracks winding through the hollows. The inn I checked into was old, the kind that smelled faintly of mildew and wood polish, with walls that seemed to sigh under their own age. The front desk clerk was polite enough, but there was a hollowness to his eyes, like he'd been used to seeing the same kind of people, tired strangers, passing through on nights like this. I didn't think much of it. It was Friday the 13th, and I had always been indifferent to such superstitions, chalking them up to folks who spent too much time in the woods worrying about bad luck. My room was at the end of a narrow hall, a single lamp flickering in the corner, casting shadows that stretched across the floorboards. I unpacked quietly, trying not to disturb the silence that hung over the inn like a weight. It was almost too quiet, though. The kind of quiet that presses against your ears until you start hearing things that shouldn't be there. I tried to shake it off, telling myself that I was tired from the drive and the early mornings. When I went into the bathroom, it seemed perfectly ordinary. The mirror above the sink was pristine, framed in dark wood that matched the faded cabinetry. I turned on the faucet, brushing my teeth in the routine way that always numbs the mind enough to relax. It was then I noticed it. My reflection didn't quite move like I did. At first, I thought it was just fatigue, maybe the way my eyes flickered in the mirror's surface. But the more I looked, the more certain I became. The reflection blinked a fraction of a second later than I did. I froze, toothbrush in hand, staring at it, and then, for some reason I can't explain, I laughed. Silly, right? Exhaustion, I told myself again. But the laughter didn't reach my eyes. After a few moments, I stepped back and noticed something else. The reflection's smile. Not mine. Not the tired, forced grin I sometimes made when brushing my teeth, but a smile that crept across its face slowly, deliberately, like it was savoring something I wasn't aware of. I froze again, feeling my pulse quicken. The room didn't feel the same. The air seemed thicker, heavy with the smell of damp wood and something I couldn't name. I blinked, and the reflection's lips had parted slightly, as though it were whispering something I couldn't quite hear. I leaned closer, and it mimicked me perfectly, but its lips moved without sound, forming words that didn't exist. I tried to rationalize it. A trick of the light, I told myself, or maybe some leftover hallucination from the long drive. I rinsed my mouth, wiped my hands on a towel, and left the bathroom, but the unease clung to me. I stepped into the room, telling myself I was imagining things, that the old inn just made shadows play strange tricks. But then I caught my reflection again. Not in the bathroom mirror, but in the little polished window of the wardrobe. The same smile, same whispered words. It was ahead of me now, moving slightly faster than I did, and it didn't stop when I stopped. I told myself to leave it alone, that I was letting my imagination run wild. But it followed me everywhere. I saw it in the tiny mirror on the nightstand, in the shiny surface of the brass doorknob, even in the water glass I had set down by the bed. Every time I looked, it was there, smiling that same deliberate, knowing smile. It wasn't just a reflection anymore. It felt like it was observing me, studying me. I stopped moving. I couldn't think, couldn't sleep, couldn't even blink without noticing it somewhere nearby, grinning at me as if it had all the time in the world. I thought about calling the front desk, but my voice seemed caught in my throat. I could hear the soft creaks of the inn settling around me, the occasional distant drip of water somewhere in the walls. It was a sound I had ignored before, but now it seemed like it was counting, marking time while the reflection waited. The silence between the creaks grew unbearable. I tried to cover every reflective surface, pulling towels over the mirrors, closing the wardrobe doors, turning off the lamps. For a while, I thought I could fool it, that maybe it would disappear if I stopped looking. But the next time I dared open my eyes, I caught it again, standing behind me in the dark reflection of the closed bathroom window. I didn't know what to do. I felt trapped in a world that should have been normal, where glass and polished metal suddenly became windows into something wrong. Panic started clawing at my chest. I felt sick, my stomach twisting, and I knew I couldn't stay. I packed my things in a trembling frenzy, ignoring the strange shivers that ran up my spine every time I passed a mirror or a polished surface. Every reflective surface mocked me, the grin etched deeper into my mind. I ran down the hall, avoiding the main rooms, trying to leave quietly so the desk clerk wouldn't see my state. The air outside felt like freedom, cold and sharp against my skin, carrying the scent of pine and frost. But even then, the feeling of being watched didn't leave me. I looked into the windows of the inn as I passed, half expecting to see the reflection waiting, but I was too far to tell. My relief was temporary, though. For weeks after that night, every time I saw a mirror, a window, even a spoon, I caught a glimpse of it. The smile, slow and deliberate, waiting. I tried telling myself it was my imagination, that the stress of travel and isolation had made me see things. I even went back, months later, thinking maybe it was a trick of the inn, a place my mind had warped into a nightmare. But when I passed the lobby mirror again, I felt that same slow pulse of awareness, that same impossible smile. It didn't move like me anymore. It moved ahead, knowing things I couldn't. I left without saying a word to anyone. Even now, when I brush my teeth at home, I pause sometimes, staring too long, hoping I'm imagining it. But the pause is never empty. The reflection lingers, somewhere just ahead of me, smiling, whispering words I can't hear. It's the strangest kind of fear, not a scream in the night or a shadow moving too quickly, but the certainty that something familiar, something that should be ordinary, has betrayed you. That what you see is no longer yours. I still dream about that inn, the way the floors creaked under my weight, the flicker of lamplight against the walls, the suffocating quiet of that hallway. And in every dream I see it waiting, patient, knowing, impossible to touch. When I wake, I check the mirror instinctively, and sometimes, just for a fraction of a second, it feels like it's smiling wider than I remember. I've tried to avoid reflective surfaces since then, and yet, every time I pass one, that same dread coils in my stomach, reminding me that it's still out there, still ahead, still watching, and I can't escape the memory. Even in sunlight, I sometimes catch myself glancing at windows, doors, or car mirrors, and for a heartbeat, I swear I see that smile again. It's not a shadow or a trick of light, it's not even real. At least, not in the way I want it to be. But it is there, somewhere, waiting in the reflections, patient as a predator, knowing that I remember and that I'll never forget. That's the thing about some nights, about places like that inn. They don't just stay behind you when you leave. They follow, etched into your mind, feeding off the unease until it becomes a part of you. And sometimes, when I'm brushing my teeth, I swear I hear the whisper again. Not words exactly, but a sound that curls around the edges of my hearing like a secret I'll never understand. And I know deep down that the reflection will never stop smiling.